is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Bristol Flyers Podcast. I'm Joel Osborne. He is Sam Hardy, the partner in crime. Sam, how's it going?
Very, very good, my friend. How are you doing? Have you had a lovely week so far?
It has been a lovely week. I haven't managed to see you too much this week because, it's been super busy at our end. It's playoff mode.
Mate, do you know what? We, because you do all of the behind the scenes stuff and I just turn up on a game day, I don't get really involved a lot with this prep, which is quite nice. But because it's near the end of the season, we have to use up our holiday days, and I'm not used to, because I was self-employed before, I didn't get used to using so many holiday days, and now got loads left, mate. So yesterday I went to Wales and played golf.
Oh, it's all right for some, mate. It's all right for some.
What were you doing yesterday? Like just pulling your hair out, probably?
Oh my God. It's playoff week, isn't it? So we had all the media come in yesterday. We had BBC Points West. We had ITV come in. BBC Radio Bristol, the BBL came in this morning as well, all to do their big previews ahead of the first round of the playoffs, which get underway this week. So
you mean to say that the BBC and ITV and that only really start getting involved when we make it to the playoffs? Is that right, Joe?
No comment. I'm Joel Osborne. He's Sam Hardy, as always. And Sam, it's playoff time. How excited are you for the playoffs?
Mate, it's weird because we knew we were in the playoffs like so long ago. Like, it's one of those seasons that, for the first time we made it. When did we know we were in the playoffs? Like months
10
ago.
games to spare.
10 games to spare. So now we're like here. It's a bit like, yeah, we know we're here. It's not a shock to us, but it's still exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been a really successful season as well. You're looking back on the season, the Flyers, their most wins ever with 25 in the regular season, highest ever league finish, and arguably, Sam, the most successful team in the Bristol Sport Group this season.
Well,
Bristol City Women. We have to shout out Bristol City Women on winning the championship crown at the weekend, obviously promoted back into WSL 1. But what do you reckon? Bristol Flyers, third place finish in the top flight. Bristol City Women earning promotion back to WSL 1. What do you think?
Do you know, it's really hard because, for them, I don't think they went into the league expecting to win. Not that they weren't, thinking they were going to battle. I knew it was going to be tough, but, this is an unbelievable achievement for them. Were you here at Ashton Gate on Sunday?
No. We had a game in Sheffield.
Oh, yeah, of course you did. But there were 7,045 people in Ashton Gate, which is a record for here. When we had Liverpool come down, I think last season or maybe the season before, we had 5,000 or whatever. So this sport is growing, and it's just amazing to see. And they won 4-0. What a game.
Amazing. Shout out to all the players and staff of Bristol City Women. An amazing achievement. Let's hope Flyers can do one more and top that as we enter playoff season. Just before we introduce this week's guest, Sam, here's a little something for you. We've had a little gift sent in from Ellen, who's been doing work experience with our podcast team behind the scenes at Bramvox. She's only gone and given us a whole load of Krispy Kreme donuts. But I'll tell you what, they're not just Krispy Kreme donuts. I don't know if I'm going to show the camera here,
but
let
me get rid of that.
They're covered in basketballs and footballs and rugby balls. Looks like an American football as well, but amazing. How cool is that?
That is amazing. Now, they're actually, they are a bit for us, but they're mainly for the guys who are here at Bramvox, and they've been waiting patiently to get themselves a donut. So come on, lads, come get yourself a donut.
Producer Dan needs to come over here and take these off me before I eat them all here on the podcast.
Say again. Yeah, I'll have the basketball one.
Oh, I'm not going to eat it now because I'll get sticky hands on the poddy. But yeah, there you go. Producer Dan. There's Producer Dan, by the way, making an appearance on the podcast.
Mate, it's one of them that people don't know what he looks like. That is what Producer Dan looks like. What a handsome man.
Handsome fellow indeed. Right, Sam, it's time for us to introduce this week's guest. And this is our big playoff preview episode. So we've got none other than BBL royalty joining us here on the Bristol Flyers podcast. It's none other than British Basketball League commentator Daniel Routledge. Dan, how's it going?
Great to be here, Joel. You're my favourite BBL commentator, and Sam, you're my favourite Joe Scott impersonator. So what could be better?
And you, right now, are my favourite Britney Spears impersonator.
I don't know if you can see, if you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can see that Dan is here in all of his, with all his gear on. He's got his commentator's mic, as a little Britney Spears mic, as you like to call it, Sam.
I've come in character.
You've left your usual podcast partner Dave Forrester behind today, and he got a little bit mad about it on Twitter yesterday, didn't he?
He's not happy. Yeah, that's why he's the grumpiest man in British basketball.
Or so everyone says, but not with us. We love you, Dave.
I did actually miss that. Was he a bit upset? Was he, Joel?
He sent a tweet to us yesterday saying that apparently Dan is moonlighting.
Yeah, he's not happy when I go on other podcasts without him.
Well, we're really pleased to have you here with us on the Bristol Flyers podcast. I think for me personally, from like a personal point of view, it's a bit of a pinch me moment having you on with us, because like you are the voice that I grew up watching BBL basketball with, and I've only been doing it for like the last sort of 5 or 6 years now, since the league asked clubs to provide their own commentators. But Dan has just been the voice that I grew up with personally. So to have you here with us on the podcast today, Dan, it's a real treat for us, a real privilege. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for reminding me how old I am, Joel.
Obviously, Dan, first of all, we've got to give you congratulations, because you talk about how long you've been doing commentating on British basketball. You are celebrating 30 years this year of commentating the British game, aren't you?
Yeah, it's mad. It was the first game I ever did was for a little-known channel called Cable 7, and it was Leicester against Worthing, and Worthing won the league title on the evening, which is how I remembered what the date was, because I could look up when they won the league title, and it was 30 years ago, a couple of weeks ago. The same day London won the league title this year, and the link was that Luke Nelson's dad Steve was playing for Worthing on that night, and I was the colour, and I came with great insight, such as he's a tall man, he's another tall man, and that's a very big man over there. You can see how I lasted 30 years.
That's amazing.
I remember listening to that game when I was just 2 years old, Dan.
Yeah, thanks.
Dan, obviously you mentioned about like your first in there into commentary, but before we get to our playoff preview, just a little bit from your background personally. Tell us like your origin story, because everyone kind of has every superhero has their own origin story, and you are considered the superhero of the British basketball game here in the country. So how did you first get into commentating in BBL?
The first thing I did was actually the PA at games at Leicester when I was about 15, I think it was. And essentially, the person who'd done it before was leaving. And I think my dad had basically just went, you could do that, because there was nobody else to do it. So I started off doing that. And then, as I say, Cable 7 came along and started filming the games and needed some commentators, and I was the expert, the 18-year-old expert, giving my insight into who's very tall. And then a year or two later, they started filming all of the games, but I was still doing the PA, and they wanted me to do the commentary. So I used to do the commentary live at Granby Halls, and then on a Monday, after I finished my college, I would head up to this little studio, sit in a tiny little booth, and commentate over the game from Saturday, and they'd then put it out. And it was a good way of learning the skill, because obviously I'd seen the game before, so I was there with the score sheet, knowing who was going to score next, sort of thing. But it's a different type of skill, commentating off screen like that. So I think it was actually, without realizing it, a good grounding in how to do it.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that measly PA announcers could, one day make
You never
it into
know.
the commentary leagues? Is that what you're saying?
You never know. I'm saying there's a chance.
You fancy yourself at giving it a go, Sam?
Do you know what? I would absolutely love to give it a go one day. I know the trouble is, I also absolutely love doing the announcing. Like I love having fun with the crowd and whatever. But I would love to give the on the commentary a go one day as well, Joel. You never know.
He's coming for your job, Joel.
I know, right? I know. I think like me personally, I've kind of really found a passion for commentating on basketball, and I only ever first got into it in 2016 when the league signed that deal Perform Group for the betting rights, and it was announced that all club games would be streamed, and so the league reached out to the clubs and said, look, can you provide your own commentators? And obviously I'd never done anything like this before. I had a degree in media and cultural studies and a very brief background in like doing voiceover work, but nothing else of the sort of even commentating on basketball. I had a knowledge of basketball, obviously growing up playing the game and stuff. And then I remember my first game was the Plymouth Raiders game versus Bristol Flyers, 2016-17, opening day of the season. And I watched that game back the other day, actually, Dan. And I don't know, when you first started, do you ever get that feeling where you just watch back some old footage and you just massively cringe at the sound of your own voice?
Well, I cringe at some of the things I said rather than the sound of the voice. Interestingly, the league put out a couple of months ago, they put out Newcastle Chester, I think it was, from about 2004. And I had nothing to do that evening, so I watched it back, and I was listening back, and I was going, "Oh, I'm a bit radio there. What's going on? I need to take half those words out. Too much talking." So I was still critiquing it. In the early days, I used to, every weekend, the games, when I started off on Sky in 98, the games were on Saturday nights at 5:30, 6 o'clock, something like that. And I used to Sunday morning watch the whole game back and sort of critique myself. And again, it's a good way of sort of getting better. You sort of go, all right, I've made a mistake there. I'm not going to do that again. And just developing on. The problem nowadays is with kids and doing 4 games a week, some weeks you just don't have time to watch everything back.
It's so interesting hearing you say how you got into it. Do you feel like, so you sort of like started doing the PA announcement, which is cool. Do you then feel like you kind of almost fell into it, or did you really want to do the commentary?
You know, it was something I always enjoyed doing, and at that age, I was 18, 19. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, if I'm honest with you. Yeah. And then I'd also started doing some match reports for local BBC radio, and then did 1 or 2 commentaries for them over the years as well. And then I was a little bit in the right place at the right time, starting at Sky, because I'd done some floor managing for the league the year before I started, so 97, 98. And what most people don't realize is how much noise is going on in your head on live TV. It's just constantly the director, the PA, the producer, loads of people talking. And that first year of doing floor managing, I always assumed they were talking to me. If I could hear anybody talking, they were talking to me. But you quickly learn when they're not talking to you. So then I was fortunate enough at the end of that year, Sue Ashworth, the executive producer of the basketball on Sky, was after a commentator start the next year, knew I'd done some, and asked me, would I like to have a go at it? And I, of course, I was 22 or something or other, 23, went, yeah, sure, I'd love to have a go at that. And I remember going down to Isleworth to Sky HQ in the summer with the late, great Kevin Cadle, because Kevin was starting off as hosting the show from that following season as well. And we replayed the playoff final. And I did the commentary and he did the colour, and sat in the other room was the head of Sky Sports and the executive producer of the basketball. And you sort of look back and you go, wow, that must have been really daunting. And yet at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. But fortunately, they liked what I did. And then I was at Sky for 3 years, and then it just sort of snowballed from there.
That's amazing. That's such a good story as well. Like, I don't think people appreciate the sort of, I love hearing everyone's journey of how they got into where they are. Do you know what I mean? Because everyone's got a different story to tell. And Dan, you speak about like how, I don't think when I started doing games, I didn't realise, one, obviously you mentioned about the number of voices in your head when you're actually doing a game. Now we have a lot less voices in our head when we do the ones on YouTube. It's just either Fred or Dan or someone like that talking into our ear, because the guys that do the podcast are the same guys that do the BBL streams this season. So you do have a voice in your head. But you put out a really good clip on Twitter the other day, didn't you, of or the other week even, of literally exactly the same stuff that you're hearing in your headset whilst you're trying to portray the story and tell the story of what's going on out there on the court.
Yeah, it was something I always wanted to do, because I'd tell people and go, oh, there are people talking in your head, and they have no real concept of what that is. And I just spoke to one of our sound guys around Christmas time, and I was like, how would I record this if I wanted to record it? And he's like, oh, just plug something in there, plug it into your laptop, and it'll go. So I tried it out in that game, and it came out really well. And the thing was, I obviously recorded the whole game. So I went back through it and I was like, oh, that's a good clip. That's a good clip. That's a good clip. And of course, Twitter only lets you put out 2 minutes and 40 seconds or something. And I narrowed it down to about 25 minutes. And I was like, oh, I think I'm going to have to edit this down a little bit. And obviously I had to make sure that Andy and Ginny, whose voices you can hear all the way through it, were happy enough with what I put out, because obviously live TV can get a bit hectic at times. But yeah, it gave people an insight. And even like my wife and my mum and people like that were like, how do you cope with all of those people talking? I'm like, well, most of the time I know when they're not talking to me. So even though the noise is there, I know they won't be talking to me. so I can ignore it. But it also gives you clues. So I know if Andy's talking about red roll, there's a replay going. So if I'm not looking at the monitor, I'm looking at the game, I need to check the monitor to see what's on the replay. Or if he's talking to the people in graphics, I know when he's talking to them, there's something going to come up on the screen that I might need to verbally reference. So it's little clues into what's going on in the screen, because obviously the viewer can only see what comes out through the pictures. So me talking about something that's happening off screen when they're seeing something different on screen is just sort of jarring. So it helps in that way.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. We, like you say, we only get the single voice. So just be Fred saying replay coming or something like that, or you got to go ad break in like 30 seconds, or he'll just tell you how long's left on a certain VT. But then when you step up to that next level and you have, what Dan does with TV, you get all the voices in your head, and it's how do you balance that? That must be really tough to tune it out or tune out a certain person or listen to a certain person.
You know what? It's the other way around because Andy, who's the director now on Sky, was my original director. And what I will say is the first 3 years at Sky, I had one of the best directors in sport and one of the best executive producers in sport. And I learned so much from those two people. In every show is going to be the best 2 hours of TV that we could possibly make. And I remember making a mistake I think it was in a playoff final, when a microphone didn't work we used to mic the coaches up, and it was Mike Burton's microphone didn't work in the timeout. And I went, I think we've got a problem with the microphone. And Andy went, what did you say that for? What did you say that for? Nobody would have known. Just carry on. Nobody would know. And it's that thing of live TV. It is the swan where the legs are going mad underneath, but everybody at home can only see the elegant moving across the screen sort of thing. And actually having those two right at the beginning of my career with the bar set so high meant I had a really good grounding. And actually, when we started doing the YouTube things and there was one person or sometimes nobody talking to you, it's always a bit weird to me that it's sort of like, it doesn't feel like it's live TV because I'm just talking to myself, And I've done international tournaments and the like, where quite often, because the director or producer are Chinese or whatever, they don't talk to you, so you don't hear any of that. And again, to me, that's the weird way round of doing it. When you can't hear anybody, I kind of feel reassured by the chaos of the truck.
Yeah, you've had some amazing, famous calls over the years. Myers to win the league, and obviously that incredible David Sloan shot this season, yes. As well. And just from your point of view as someone that's been in the game for 30 years. What is it that makes a good commentator, and what is it that makes a great commentator?
It's about nailing the moments, isn't it? That's the thing. Now the interesting thing about modern commentary is when I did Myers for Win the League, I didn't know that 25 years later, on whatever it was, 2nd of April or something, people were going to tag me into a social media post with that clip in, and it was going to live in that way, because we didn't have social media 25 years ago. Whereas now, everything goes out on social media. So in some ways, there's almost more of a pressure to nail an important play or a big play, because otherwise, when it gets into if you've got a top 10 play of the week, and you're talking about somebody's shoelaces at the other end of the floor while somebody's doing a 360 windmill, it sort of kills the clip, doesn't it? And you look like an idiot. Whereas back when I started, there was none of that, so it wasn't quite. It's just an interesting quirk of the way it is. But I think one of the keys to answer your question is giving yourself room and space to do it, particularly on TV. Because I mentioned watching that other game back, I thought I was a little bit radio, too much talking. And actually, if you give yourself a little bit of space, room to breathe, then you can nail the big moment. Whereas if you say too much, and in some ways, the Sloan play, when I watched that back first time, I was like, it was good. I was happy with it. But there was a few bits I could have taken out, because it was Sloan to the basket, kicks out to Onwards, and where it's a bit too much, and you've got to be in the place to be able to say Sloan in the corner for the win at the time that happens. You can't be 2 or 3 seconds late. You've got to nail that. And I probably could have given myself a little bit. I mean, I'm being harsh because it did come out well, but it is about giving yourself the room and the space, and also not peaking too early. sometimes you hear people who are going wild in the first quarter over a free throw, and it's sort of like, well, where are you going to go when you get the game-winning shot on the buzzer? There's no way up, no further you can go up. So it's sort of building through the game, but actually giving yourself a bit of breathing space so that when the thing happens that you have to be there for, you can go. You're not trying to finish off whatever the last thing you were saying is.
I think you are being harsh on yourself, because that play had so many different things in it. The kick out to the back to him, the drive to the corner. It was a really complex play, wasn't it? And anyway.
Yeah, there was a lot going on, and obviously you've got the atmosphere and everything. It was funny because I had no idea what I said after I'd said it, and actually I think if you watch the clip for about 40 seconds after, there are a couple of deliberate pauses in there where either Rowe had finished or I'd finished, and I don't go. It's almost like, let's just soak up some of the moment, some of the atmosphere before we say the next thing. And I don't know whether that was sort of compensating somewhere along the line, but it was something I noticed that, and actually that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about those moments of celebration. It is about those fans and those Scottish basketball fans who'd gone through mainly thin, but thick and thin with this team for 20 years, enjoying that moment. It doesn't need overkill on that. So you do need to try and capture some of that and add to it rather than take away.
Yeah, there is so much pressure, I feel, as well, on documenting those historic moments, because you want to do like the player justice, you want to do the team justice with winning their first title in 20 years or whatever it was, and there's like, you have to balance the two, and you have to stay composed as well. You can't get too excited over the play. And I've had a number of times I've just gone absolutely nuts and almost just shouted down the mic, and I've watched it back and just been like, I've absolutely butchered that. but have you had and how do you measure if you're a player, it's easy to measure when you had a good game, because you look at the box score, it's like, yeah, I've had 20 points, I've shot well from the field. But like as a commentator, I kind of struggle with this as well sometimes. It's like, how do you measure when you've had a good game? Is it all just down to like personal feeling about how you felt leaving that game, do you think?
Yeah, it's a feel thing, as you say. I can't go to the box stats and go, I was 8 for 9 from the free throw line today. It is about the feel, and some of it is like, oh, did I get some good bits of information out? Did I hit the right notes for the breakaway dunk that might be in the top 10 and all of that? But there are other times where I've come off a game and I've gone, oh, I was terrible tonight. And Rowe goes, what are you talking about? You were pretty good. And I think he means it rather than just trying to make me feel better. But there are times where you just sort of go, I wasn't quite there. But as you say, I'm not quite sure what quite there is. It's one of those things. But again, there is also that thing of the big final. The adrenaline goes in the same way I'm sure it does for the players. You're there, big moment, got to get this right, got to bring the best stuff you've got. But yeah, I think it is a feel. But what I would say is it's probably more in your head, Joel, than it is in reality. Because the one thing I've talked to people before about, people go, oh, what about public speaking and stuff like that? People say, well, I don't like standing up in front of people and talking to them and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, all you're doing is talking, and you can do that anyway. So you're projecting something onto people without actually knowing it. And the example I gave is, I remember doing a Plymouth game years ago, and I can't remember who they were playing, and I can't even remember what I said, but I remember saying something in the third quarter and thinking, that was the stupidest thing you could possibly have said. And actually it then played with me for the rest of the game and actually affected performance for the rest of the game. I wasn't quite as good for the rest of the game as I could. And then I watched the game back, and I didn't even notice whatever the stupid thing I said was, just sort of went by without even, and I was like, actually, I've spent 15 minutes thinking about something I did that I didn't notice when I watched it. So again, it goes back to that Swan thing, is if you do make a mistake, just carry on.
Yeah.
Carry on. 90% of the time, most people don't notice. And actually, you can allow it to sort of impact on performance. I guess it's that thing like players, shooters shoot, don't they? Doesn't matter that Watson Gale go miss 5 3-pointers. He's still taking number 6 because he thinks it's going in.
Yeah.
And and when it goes in, he was right.
Yeah. Well, it's not often we see Jelani Watson-Gale miss 5 3-pointers in a game.
No. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
Yeah. Well, we could literally be. I mean, we could talk to you all day about just commentating in general because it's so insightful. And for me personally, and I imagine for you, Sam, as well as doing being PA announcer for the club, sort of where Dan started out. We could literally talk to you all day about commentating on games.
Well, what I was going to say is it's just dawned on me how Joel's orchestrated this whole podcast just so that he can get a free session with you, Dan, about how to be a better.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to get a free one-to-one, a little bit.
You'd only had to ask, Joel. You didn't have to set up the whole podcast for it.
Well, we've got you on to actually preview the BBL playoffs, and we've gone in for 20 minutes. Haven't even spoken about the playoffs yet. So let's get down.
There are playoffs. Oh, I missed that.
Must have forgotten the playoffs this weekend. But before we do get into playoffs, just a quick word on the regular season as a whole. What have you made of it? What have you made of Flyers season as a whole? Obviously, there were the pre-season picks at the beginning of the season, not made by you, but other members of your team at Sky Sports. We won't name on the podcast.
Let's name Drew Lasker. Let's out him again. We've spent the whole season killing him for picking Bristol last. Let's do it again now. Yeah. No, I mean, it's been really good. The Fly season has been really good. And to be fair to Drew, I don't think if I had picked, I don't think I would have picked the Flyers third because basically it's a new team. There's a couple of guys that you've had before, but there's a lot of new guys in there. It was a different looking team when you look at the structure of it. And we were sort of going, and then even myself, the first few games I'm going, they don't shoot the ball very well. There's this and that. Oh, they're playing all these games at home. What will happen when they go away from home? And then, every week, another win or two on the board. So it's a really remarkable season. And credit to Andreas for putting that group together. And also that group as well. Dave always says it on Sunday Night Breakdown is they don't look like there's any real egos in there. It doesn't really look like anybody's going, well, why is he getting all the shots and I'm not getting any shots? Everybody seems to get their turn and everybody seems comfortable in that sort of thing, which is the best way to have it. And so many different guys can come and be the superstar on any given night. There doesn't seem to be a massive hierarchy in anything. So, it's an incredible season. And you at the beginning were talking about 25 wins. You missed out about 6 of the records that you've set there, Joel. This is basically number 1 in every category for Bristol Flyers, except for away wins, which it's tied for first, but you've still got a chance to get another away win and be first outright. So, it's just an incredible season for the Flyers. From the league as a whole, obviously London relatively comfortable in the league, but that sort of 2 to 7, there's not really much between any of those teams, is there? You sort of look at them and think, okay, Sheffield are 7th and Leicester are 2nd, but Sheffield have beaten them a couple of times. Manchester's a really good team. They can catch fire at any point. Cheshire have been brilliant at times this year as well. So it sort of 2 to 7, super tight. Newcastle had their moments, didn't they? And Plymouth had their moments, but it's been really, really competitive, and really fun to watch because of the tightness of the league. Behind London, obviously.
What about the that symmetry of the league table, Dan? Have you enjoyed
that's
that?
mind-blowing, isn't it? Absolutely mind-blowing. You know who spotted that? Vince McCauley.
Really?
Vince McCauley sent me a text with a screenshot of the league and went, have you seen this? Look at that. And I went, I didn't even notice that. And it was like, that was absolutely that'll never happen again. I can't believe that's happened anywhere in the world before, because that was so mind-boggling.
Yeah, it was literally crazy. Everything from top to bottom, identical, going through. You can see the league table there on your screen if you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast. But
I had a moment. I saw it as well. I hadn't actually seen anything else about it. So I looked at the table and I went, in my head for a few seconds, it was like, oh, of course that happens because of the amount of games played versus blah, blah, blah. And then I went, no, that is absolutely crazy, isn't it?
I think it's the only time ever in professional sport you'll ever see that. I don't think, like you say, Dan, I've never seen that ever. And also to actually go and notice that as well. I didn't notice that whatsoever either. So that's a great spot.
No, I didn't notice it. All credit to Vince. Yeah.
Dan, anyone that listens to your podcast will know that how much you love offensive rebounds, and the Flyers obviously led the league in offensive rebounds this season. And I was going to get to this question that we had come in to the podcast, because we had a question come in from Flyers assistant coach Nick Burns.
Okay.
And I don't think you guys have met in person.
I'm starting to worry now.
I tell you what, if you ever had a podcast where you were to get Dave Forrester and Nick Burns on the same podcast together, they would be able to go on. I reckon they could go on for a good 3 hours without taking a break. They could talk for hours. But we've had a voice memo come here, and I know you can't.
Okay.
I know you can't hear what's coming through our desk, so I'm going to play it on my phone down the microphone. A question coming through here from Coach Burns. Let's take a listen.
Hi guys, Coach Nick here with a question for Dan. Hi there, Dan. It's nice to see they've got some proper guests on the podcast, actually. But anyway, Dan, I know how much you hate the offensive rebounding stat as a measure of a team's quality, but I do wonder if you want to change your mind now that the season is over. I've been looking through the Flyers stats for the season, and we've actually managed to finish in the bottom half of the league in quite a few notable categories. We were 8th in field goal shooting, 10th in free throw shooting, 7th in assists, and a few others. And there are only, looking at it, 3 categories where we finished in the top 2 in the league. One of them is offensive rebounding, where we were first. Second in total rebounds, even though we were only 6th in defensive rebounds. And one other category, which I can't remember now. What was the other one? What was the other one that we were in the top 2 in? Oh, yeah, wins. Any thoughts? Love you, Dan. Love the podcast. Love to Dave. Bye now.
That's brilliant.
Sassy old text, isn't it?
You sent a sassy voice memo when we had Roy Owen on the podcast the other week, and another sassy voice memo from Coach Burns when we had Dan come on the podcast. Dan, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
So I have thoughts on this. I was going to save them for Rowe, but I'm going to throw them out here because this is an argument that me and Amp Rowe have had all season because of you guys. And you might have heard us on the TV talking about it, and you might have heard me throwing cheap shots at him at Sunday Night Breakdown. But we drive to the games together. This goes on in the car to and from games. So here is my rebuttal to the offensive rebound. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, it's the most offensive rebounds the Flyers have ever had in a season. They're miles clear of everybody else at the top of the offensive rebounds per game. And Rowe will tell you it's not just about the second chance points, which aren't great, by the way, for the amount of offensive rebounds that you get. It's also about wearing the other team down. And I get that. You play defense for 30, 35 seconds instead of 18, 19 seconds. That's going to wear you down. But here is my argument is if you're good at offensive rebounds, you must miss shots. Okay. Because if you make shots, you don't get offensive rebounds. So my thing is I would rather a team shoot the ball well than gets lots of offensive rebounds. So here's my stat for you, Coach Burns. 40. Let's take 40%, random number, 40% field goal shooting. Not that great. The league average is 45%. So it's below league average, 40% field goal shooting. Do you know what Bristol's record is when shooting 40% or above?
What is the record?
22-2. Oof. Do you know what their record is when shooting 40% or below? Which, bear in mind, they get an extra 3 offensive rebounds per game, up to 16 offensive rebounds per game, 4 and 11. Oof. So maybe making the shots is the key thing. When you shoot above 40%, you generally win. One of the losses, by the way, when you get to 45%, it goes to something like 17-1 or 16-1. One of the losses was Manchester making 19 3-pointers against you. So that almost doesn't even count. You know what I mean? If the other team's going to make 19 3-pointers, you're not going to win. But and I said this on Sunday Night Breakdown, way back at the beginning. I said if Flyers shoot 45% and rebound like that, they'll win a lot of games. And actually, I was optimistic because it's actually, if you shoot 40% and get those rebounds, you're going to win a lot of games. And you did win a lot of games, so fair play.
But there is something majestic about TB flying for the air, grabbing one-handed offensive rebound and landing again. Isn't that just beautiful?
It is beautiful.
It is a thing of beauty. But if the ball goes in the first place, it's worth 2 points or 3 points.
Yeah, but the players get tired of playing the extra bit of defense and physical game and things like that.
Part of me thinks Dan had those stats a little bit ready for that one, actually, John.
I did, because I wanted to stick it to Rowe, but then Coach Burns comes in and I have to stick it to him instead.
I'll tell you what, you mentioned that Manchester game. I do remember that game very well. They shot the ball incredibly well.
We got 99 points, Joe, in that game.
We did, but Manchester, you know what they're like. They'll shoot 43s in a game and they'll get a ball up in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock. I guess it kind of links us quite nicely into the playoff segment of the podcast we wanted to chat about. Obviously, Flyers and Giants both playing each other in the first round. The first leg, we're recording this podcast on a Wednesday, so at the time of recording, the first leg is tomorrow. If you're listening on Thursday, then you may have already had the first leg. But 2 legs of action, aggregate score. How do you see this one playing out, Dan?
You got any happy memories from this, Joel?
Well, we were at some of my show notes for a little bit later on in the pod, but
okay, I won't ruin it then.
Last year's playoff quarterfinals. Amazing.
This is one of those things, is you sort of look at the playoffs and obviously people go 1, 2, 3, 4 are supposed to win because they're the highest seeds. And usually, most years, one of them loses somewhere along the line. But more often than not, you do get more of the top 4 through than the bottom 4. And I can't see Newcastle beating London, by the way. So the question is, and I'm not sure there's much of a difference between Cheshire and Caledonia. So can either Sheffield or Manchester beat Leicester or Bristol? And the answer to that is they probably both can.
Yeah.
The thing with Manchester is that 3-point shooting that you've talked about. Again, I looked up their stats as well. When they make 10 3-pointers or more, they're 12-7. And when they don't make 10 3-pointers, they're 5-14. That's a massive difference. And to give you some context, you guys are 10-4 and 16-9. It's not a massive difference that in that stat. So that is the thing. I'm sure Coach K will have that high on his scout report. But it's one thing to say, well, we need to take the 3-point shot away from Manchester. It's quite a different thing to stop Dirk shooting threes from 30 feet.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys where you kind of forget, like, what he's doing is not really normal. You know, the way he shoots the ball is not normal. Yeah. It shouldn't be that easy, sort of thing. Look, I would say if it was a best of something series, you would take Bristol, but in an aggregate format, Manchester can have one quarter where they just go mad, and that would be the worry. Is can you keep with that? Now, my sense of Bristol, because historically we've always said, oh, well, they don't really score and they like these 60 to 50 games sort of thing. But not this year's team. This year's team can score, and they probably could get in a scoring race with Manchester and still come out on top. I don't think I would make that option number one, but I think they could win in that way. Having the second leg at home, the atmosphere there, it's a tight place and it'll be loud and the fans will be behind it. And that, I think that's what tips me towards the Flyers because of that. But man, it's a brave man in recent years that would bet against the likes of Dirk Williams and Ramon Fletcher and that. But I just think for what they've done this season, Bristol will win over the course of 80 minutes. But the scary thing with Manchester is that 10 minutes where Dirk goes nuts or Nick Lewis comes off the bench and hits a load of threes or Fletcher goes wild. You know, they've got that explosion in them, Manchester.
Yeah, they've got the ability, as you say, to get hot on. Any player can get hot on any given night. They've got the big three of Ramon Fletcher, Taj Green, and Dirk Williams. But then William Lee coming back from injury as well. And then you go further down the bench, you've got like Nick Lewis coming off the bench, and he had a great game against us last time out. But if you look at the season series right now, Dan, obviously it's 2 games apiece in the league. In all competitions, Flyers lead the series 3 games to 2. And if you look at the run of form coming into the playoffs, Flyers have won their last 3, and Manchester, they lost the last 6 games. And I know basketball's not played on paper, but the form book looks in Flyers' favour at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think part of Manchester, so I don't think they were overly bothered where they finished, because I think they've got gamers who just go, we'll beat anybody. It doesn't really matter, we'll play. Whereas obviously Flyers were trying to get second place, fighting with Leicester. So those two teams were pushing each other along. You're right, though. It's hard to switch it back on. And Lee hasn't quite looked himself since he's come back from injury. And that's a big piece of what they do, him defensively blocking shots and knocking down threes and really stretching out the defense. So I think my thing with Manchester is I think Bristol have got enough defensively to be able to cope with that. There, as you say, there is the wild card of somebody like Lewis, or even Kofi Joseph's had a good game last week, and obviously he joined late, so it's difficult to get into the rhythm of everything. They have got shooters, but when I just think the best case scenario for Manchester is that it comes down to the last few plays. But Bristol have proven this year they can close games out. Watson Gale has been absolutely tremendous at the end of the games. We've seen Mike Miller do it before. Obviously, defensively, you've shown you can block a shot late in a game if you need to as well. So I think that just about shades it.
Yeah, you mentioned blocking shots late in games. You've got a clip here from last season's playoff quarter-final at home. Just an incredible atmosphere, this game. I mean, Flyers 12 points down after the first leg, needing to win by 13 or more. 5 seconds to go. You see on the screen there, if you're watching the video version, Mike Miller knocking down that incredible shot to cause Manchester to call a timeout. And there was still time at the end of this shot, wasn't there, Sam? They had one last play to force overtime or win it with a three. And then out of nowhere, Malcolm Delpesh just coming over from the weak side and just sending Flyers through to that Final Four. Incredible night that was, wasn't it, Sam?
I mean, Dan, how much longer do you think we've got left of milking this clip?
I think you've got at least 7 or 8 years of milking that clip now. That's a good clip. That is a good clip. And it was one of them. I remember watching it in real time. I thought that was a good play that Manchester made. I thought the shot was there. But obviously Delpesh had different ideas. Yeah. It's an incredible, decent defensive play. And as you say, I know a lot of people don't like aggregate, and I must admit, when we first brought aggregate back, it was about 10 years ago. It hadn't been in the league for a long time. I was like, what is this? It doesn't make any sense. But actually, over the years, I've sort of grown to enjoy the sort of like weirdness, the quirks of it, the way you get people calling a timeout with 3 seconds to go when they're up 12 in the first leg because 14 is better than 12, and all of those sorts of wild things about it. And I think in some ways you have to do it a few times to get used to it. And obviously you've got the experience, but the coaches more so than the players, I think. You've got the experience now, the last few years of winning in that format. It does bring something different, because as you say, that if that was a best of 3 series, they were 2 very ordinary games, weren't they? Yeah. Because one wins by 12, and the other wins by 13 or whatever. Yeah. The ending of those, you wouldn't be playing the clip of that shot at the end of a second leg if there was a third leg to come, because it would just be, they probably wouldn't have even shot the ball, never mind called a timeout. Yeah. So it does add something a little different. It is weird, and I understand why people really don't like it, but it's kind of grown on me, the 2 legs.
As a PA announcer doing all the mental mathematics in front of everyone. It's horrible, mate, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've got the short straw of having to commentate on the second leg on Sunday, so I'm kind of hoping it's a nice even number at least, or a multiple.
You want to draw
5.
in the first leg is what you want. Draw in the first leg takes all the maths out.
Either that, or at least a multiple of 5 or something like that, so it makes life a little bit easier. Dan, before we move on to our next segment of the podcast, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Obviously, you're calling the BBL playoff final this year. If I put you on the spot right now, which 2 teams are joining you at the O2 on May 14th?
Wow, John.
London, and London's women.
Well, that's 2 guaranteed teams there. There we go. But that other spot, you just can't call it, right?
No, the other spot. I mean, I would like to see Leicester against Bristol in the semi-final. I don't know that I would bet money on it because I don't know. I just feel like one of Sheffield or Manchester might well win. But I would like to see Leicester against Bristol, and I'd like to see, because the two teams, nothing really separated them, second and third on points difference in a tied head-to-head. I think that would be the ultimate way of sort of deciding it, and one of them going and taking their shot at London in the final.
Yeah, well, there won't be long till we find out. Obviously, playoffs getting underway this weekend, and a reminder for the fans tuning in at home, you can watch both legs of Flyers versus Manchester Giants on the BBL YouTube channel. First leg Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at the National Basketball Performance Centre. The second leg is on Sunday, 4 p.m. tip-off at the SGS College Arena. Sold-out game, that one, so can you watch it online? So it'll be exciting. Dan, great stuff. Thanks so much for helping us preview the playoffs. Hopefully you'll stick around for our news segment, our word of the week, and our mailbag section at the end. But Sam, it is time for us to look back at what's been going on around the BBL with this week's news.
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Right, here's a look at what's been happening around the league this week, and of course, Flyers nailing their third place finish in the league. 2 wins to round up the regular season to make it 25 league wins this season. A third place finish. They fell to the Leicester Riders in that head-to-head by, I think it was 22 points in the end on the tied head-to-head. What did you make of those 2 games, Sam?
I thought reasonably comfortable. Obviously, the first game, both games actually, not with VJ, who I think's just making sure he was good for the playoffs. So we're all good there. We'd already confirmed third place, so it was one of those things. But we looked good, Joel. That group of boys looked like they were just comfortable out there. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Obviously, a strong performance over Sheffield on the Friday. On Sunday, a very strong start. Even on the Friday, getting my games mixed up. Sheffield on the Sunday, strong start for them. Dan, without getting to Sunday night breakdown on us, obviously you rounded up both of those games on your podcast last week. Strong way for Flyers to end the regular season.
Yeah, particularly the away game at Sheffield, because I thought Sheffield they'd been playing well. They obviously lost the game on Friday. I thought they were ready to bounce back, and with no VJ King and in a game that didn't really matter for the Flyers, I thought Sheffield might take that, but Bristol really from tip to buzzer looked good in that.
Yeah, and then we have to also, looking back on Friday's game, we've got to give a shout out, by the way, to the charity night we ran in partnership with the Bristol City Robbins Foundation. Obviously, we had our teddy toss at the game. We've got a clip here we can run on screen of the teddy toss. And Sam, this was really good, wasn't it? Just hundreds and hundreds of teddy bears just being launched onto the court. Here at the SGS College Arena. Fred's still trying to flap around and get the clip up on screen. He's getting to it now.
Too busy eating donuts, I think.
Yeah, but there you go. Look, you see it on screen. Just hundreds of bears, all those teddies being donated to the Teddy Trust, which is set up to help children in need across the world. Obviously, we started selling bears at the game as well. All the money raised from that was donated to the Bristol Children's Hospital charity, the Wallace and Gromit Grand Appeal. It all went down really well, and the performance from the cheerleaders as well made it a real spectacle.
Well, I think the guys from Teddy Trust came, didn't know what to expect necessarily, and it was, it actually was absolutely beautiful. Everyone was getting really involved, and then having the cheerleaders there to help clean up afterwards, I think would have been tricky without them, Joel. It was quite the clear-up job, wasn't it?
It was, and then you managed to get it done in a couple of minutes or so not too bad indeed. Also, I'd give a massive shout out to the fans that travelled to Sheffield on Sunday. Obviously, Dan just referenced it there. A bit of a, doesn't mean anything in terms of the league standings, but you see it on the screen there. There's loads of fans just travelling to that game, the last league game of the regular season.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just been there's been a lot of travelling happening throughout the season. Obviously, it's a special one, the last regular season game. But I think it's amazing to see, and actually we get it down at SGS as well. Loads of travelling fans from other clubs, and it's just beautiful to see the support these teams are getting in a league like the BBL. You know what I mean?
Yeah, great to see. Hopefully, they're all treated to a day out at the O2 in a couple of weeks' time. Fingers crossed. We'll still have to see about that one, but I'm sure if we make it there, they will travel in their hundreds. Other news around the league this weekend, Sam. We've got to give a shout out to our partners, game day sponsors at Drive Direct. They are giving out free T-shirts. I've got one with me right here in the studio. A nice pink T-shirt. Take Flight. It's our official BBL playoff T-shirt. All fans attending Sunday's second leg at the SGS College Arena versus Manchester will get a free T-shirt courtesy of Drive Direct.
I love that. Good colour as well, Joel. I love the bright pink.
A sea of pink at the SGS College Arena certainly will be great to see. They funded T-shirts for everyone, so grab one. When you arrive at the game, they'll be available straight away as soon as you walk in. Just grab your T-shirt, head on in, and see if we can get a sea of pink going at the SGS Boys campus.
Love that.
It'd be great to see. Other news going on for Bristol Flyers in particular. The Bristol Flyers Supporters Club End of Season Awards is now open. The voting is now open for the End of Season Awards. You can see it on the Bristol Flyers website. A whole bunch of great categories that supporters can vote on, including Player of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and a couple of fun awards in there as well. And we're going to get Sam and Amy from the Bristol Flyers Supporters Club to join us right here on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time for a very special episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast where we'll reveal the winners of all of those awards. So get the fresh waters at the ready, Sam, for that one.
I cannot wait for a lovely little fresh water again, Joel.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I might get a dinner jacket on for that one, actually. A little bow tie. I think it'll look quite nice here in the studio for the YouTube version.
You're going for most handsome podcaster of the year, aren't you, Joel? That's what you're going for, mate.
I saw one of the categories was best hair, and I was surprised that Sam Hardy's name wasn't on the list for that one.
Well, it wouldn't be fair otherwise, so.
Right, other news going on around the club this week. We're still running a competition. Our competition is just closed for the the Mike Miller Ball Handling Challenge. Never Stop Learning. We actually have to pick a winner, Sam. So we've had some great entries come in from all of the supporters. Here you see some of the highlights of some of their entries. We asked fans to recreate Mike Miller's ball handling workout for a chance to win 2 Flyers tickets to the BBL playoffs and a free space at Bristol Flyers summer holiday camp. Some great entries come in across the board. We've narrowed it down to 2 final entries, Sam, for us to pick a winner for. Dan, I know you can't see what's on the screen here, so we were going to get you to vote here if you're a winner. However, Sam and I are going to decide the winner of this one. The first entry is from Enzo, if we can get that up on screen, Fred. Here's Enzo doing his 2-ball dribble. Very nice indeed. Followed by some crossovers and then finishing up with some behind-the-back dribbles. Little Steph Curry there for you. Future Flyers star in the making. Great entry there from Enzo. Entry number 2 is from Leonardo. Young Bristol Flyers fan Leonardo. Here he is doing the 2-ball dribble. Alternating dribble, behind the back dribbles as well. Look at that.
That is amazing, Joel.
Not even looking as well. And there you see some crossovers at the end. Sam, we have to pick a winner. The winner of this will win 2 tickets to the BBL playoff final at the end, or the middle of May. And they'll win a free Flyers summer holiday camp. Sam, who you picking?
They're both amazing, obviously, and lots of the entries are beautiful as well, Joel, but I'm going to have to go with clip number 2 there, which is Leonardo, I believe.
Well, congratulations to you, Leonardo. You are the winner of 2 BBL playoff final tickets and a free Flyers summer holiday camp space. What a prize.
What a prize. And really good handling. We'd like to see that on the court one day, Leonardo. That'd be great.
We've got another one final Web Games Never Stop Learning Challenge, which we are launching. I think it's launched today, or we'll probably shout about it tomorrow. Malcolm Delpech's low post workout. So we're going to post that on socials. Again, fans can get involved by the Bristol Sport Foundation app. Send your entries in, and we'll pick a winner to win some playoff tickets and a free Flyers holiday camp space.
Beautiful.
So keep an eye out for that on Bristol Flyers socials. Right, that's it for this week's news, Sam. It's time for us to get to Word of the Week.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Right, time for us to get to this week's Word of the Week. And Dan, this one is right up your street. I don't know if you listen to the Bristol Flyers Podcast, Dan, but we have a little game here on the podcast called Word of the Week. And we ask fans to send in their suggestions for words to add into our Wheel of Misfortune. Every time the Flyers have a home game, we give the wheel a spin. Whichever word it lands on, I've got to try and squeeze into the commentary for that weekend's game. Have you ever had friends text you at all to try and squeeze random words in at all?
Yes, over the years I have. There used to be somebody who used to work at the Birmingham Bullets back in the day, who used to try and convince me every week to put in some random word, but I tended to ignore it, Joel. That would be my advice. Ignore these crazy people.
Hey, are you suggesting I'm the crazy person here, Dan?
Well, if the cap fits.
Right, well, before we ask you, Dan, to give us a word, because we have a space available football after hippopotamus was last week's word. We have to listen back to the clip from last week's broadcast. And I tell you what, Sam, any other week, hippopotamus would have been a nightmare of a word to squeeze in. However, we had our teddy toss at the game last weekend, and it fit perfectly at half-time when talking about the number of stuffed animals being thrown on the court. Tell you what, Sam, take a listen to this one. And here come the Bears! It's raining stuffed animals! There's animals of all shapes and sizes. There's teddy bears, there's dogs. I think there's even a hippopotamus in there as well. Absolutely nailed it.
Joel, you got so lucky that week, mate. It's literally unbelievable. If it was any other week, you would not get that in. Or you wouldn't. It would sound ridiculous. So, all right.
Yeah, it was perfect timing, and it landed on hippopotamus, and it was just coincidence that we had Teddy Toss that weekend.
Love it.
Great stuff. So that was last week's word of the week. However, it does mean we've got a word available on our wheel right here. And Dan, as our guest for this week's podcast, we would like you to come up with a word to add to our wheel. What do you think?
So I was just looking around trying to find something. I've randomly just spotted a cassette tape. I don't know what it is. It's like a Lego cassette tape. I didn't know whether to go with cassette tape or a fireplace. I think fireplace would be harder than cassette tape to get in. I can't see the reference in basketball, so I'm going to go with fireplace.
Fireplace? That's actually
fireplace.
A really good word.
He's so hot. He needs something like that, Joe. You're going to have to get in there, aren't you?
You just put him in the fireplace.
Yeah,
right,
I like that.
I'm going to add this to my wheel. Where are we? Fireplace. There it goes on the wheel.
I like that.
There's some great words on here. There's all sorts of words. It was the word Hoya, thanks to Malcolm last week. Whole bunch here. Right, Sam, are you ready? It's time for us to spin the wheel. Oh. Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Oh no! It's landed on Hoya, thanks to Malcolm Delpech last week.
Thank you, Malcolm. That is amazing. Good luck, Joel.
Oh, I gotta get the word Hoya into the playoffs. Probably the biggest game of the season. And I gotta try and get that word in there. That's gonna be an absolute nightmare.
I love it.
It's got to be on a Delpech play as well, I suggest.
I reckon. I think if Malcolm dunks it or something like that, I can say, well, that one is a little bit of Hoya.
Yeah, I like that.
Or something like that. So, yeah, that word was suggested by Malcolm Delpech last week. So thanks for that, Malcolm. I have to try and squeeze in the word Hoya into Sunday's commentary against the Manchester Giants in the second leg of the BBL playoff quarter-final. And you can watch me try and do that at 4 p.m. over on the BBL YouTube channel.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Right, time to wrap up this week's episode of the podcast with our mailbag segment. And Dan, we asked the fans to send in some of their questions to you as our studio guest. We picked out some of our favourite questions to ask you here on the podcast. So
I'm slightly worried because my wife saw this on Instagram last night and went, "Can I ask questions?" And I was like, "No."
Of course you can.
No.
I'll tell you what, I've made notes here of the questions that have been asked, but I haven't actually checked it since this morning. So there could be some new questions that have just come into the mailbag.
No, because it'll be something like, "Can you go and do the dishes?" or something like that.
Okay, I've got some.
Have you taken the washing out?
And have you taken the washing out, Dan?
Not today. I did yesterday.
Great stuff. Right, first question here. This one has come through from Sam Comley from the Bristol Flyers Supporters Club. He's been in touch and he wants to know, what is the craziest game you've had to call in your BBL career?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I don't know I can do that off the top. Craziest game. Does it have to be on TV?
I guess just any game in general.
Any game. So I did the PA for the 5 overtime game between Leicester and Brighton. That was pretty mad because it was like, okay, we've had enough of this. Can somebody just win the game? This needs to end now. It was on a Sunday. It was on a Sunday afternoon in the old John Sanford Sports Centre. God rest its soul. 5 overtimes, absolutely bonkers.
Outrageous.
5 is that the record for the BBL? Must be.
That is the record. Yeah.
Well, we had 4 overtimes a couple of years ago against Glasgow, if you remember, away from home. The lads almost missed their flight home, but luckily it was delayed. So they luckily made the flight on time after 4 periods of overtime because the flight was delayed. Thanks, EasyJet.
Poetry in motion, that.
Yeah, but never had a 5, so that's the record. Great stuff.
Next,
go on.
Oh, okay. The next question for you here, Dan, is coming in from Instagram from Eli_Matt01, and he asks, is VJ King the next big thing in the BBL? What are your thoughts on his debut season?
I don't think he's the next big thing. I think he is a big thing. I mean, he's been absolutely brilliant. I would have him. I haven't done my All-Star 5 for the BJA Awards yet, but he will be in my All-Star 5 VJ. I actually got a stat on him. He's the first Flyer to average 18 points per game over the course of the season. Aaron Crosby and Doug Herron both had 17.9. So, yeah, I think he's great. I mean, he's just a really tough matchup for everybody in the league, and hopefully he's fully fit for the playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, well, one thing we were talking about the other day is the league MVP race, and whether or not we think VJ is a candidate for league MVP. And obviously, I don't know how many games you have to play in the league for it to be considered for the league MVP award, but what are your thoughts? Is VJ a candidate for league MVP this year?
So yeah, I had I got asked this question the other day, and I instantly went with Decker, King, and Zach Jackson from Leicester as my 3, and then I was starting to think, where do I go with 4 and 5? So I've got him in there. I would pick Decker myself, but he's right there for me, VJ King.
Yeah, 100%. There was one thing I was going to ask you actually, and before the podcast, Dan, I don't know if you've already said it, but we actually asked you to come up with your most obscure Flyers stat from your supercomputer. I hope you've got your supercomputer on standby.
I have. I have my random stat ready.
Here we go. So Dan has come up with his most random Bristol Flyers stat this season. Dan, What have you got for us?
Well, I'm only giving it to you on the proviso that it makes it into the tweet for Coach K's recipe for success this week.
Okay. We can make that happen, I reckon.
Well, it depends what it is.
We can make this happen.
Well, let's see what it is first.
The Bristol Flyers are 10-0 this season when committing 16 or more turnovers per game. So Coach K's recipe for success needs to say, be more careless with the ball.
Don't
the ball take care of it. Just toss it around. 10-0.
16 or more turnovers. Amazing.
We don't have any information on this, though, but it'd be interesting to know, like, the thing is, too many more turnovers than that, and they probably wouldn't be winning anymore. So it's got to be, like, close to 16.
One of them was, like, 20. One of them was 20-something, 24 or something, still won the game.
I reckon that was a Cheshire Phoenix game, I can tell you right there. That's an incredible stat. Thanks for that, Dan. That was awesome.
I love that.
We did ask him to come up with his most random stat of the season, and he certainly delivered for us.
I've got another question here from Matt Hardy from BBL Daily on Twitter. I'm sure you've had run-ins with him in the past, Dan.
Indeed.
And he asks, have you ever considered doing a word of the week for your commentary? What do you think?
No. No.
What do you reckon,
Don't
Dan?
open up that Pandora's box.
You reckon we could maybe if we get rid of the word Hoya and we give this wheel another spin, we give you what games have you got this week? Are you doing the Leicester game and the Sky game?
We're doing Leicester versus Sheffield on Sky on Sunday. It was the only Sunday game available, so we're doing Leicester Sheffield again.
What do you reckon, Dan? If we gave this wheel one more spin, would you be up for
I can't promise anything. I can't even see the wheel to know what I'm setting myself
I'll tell you
up
what, I'll tell you some of the words. We've got kerfuffle, we've got donut, hullabaloo, spooky, stethoscope. What's this one?
Some of them
fireplace,
are doable.
Obviously the one that you
Fireplace,
suggested.
no. Yeah.
The one from our Dr. Craig here, sternocleidomastoid.
I can't even say that.
Asparagus. But I'll tell you what, if you're up for it, Dan, we'll remove the word Hoya. Sam and I will add an extra word in there, and whichever word it lands on, see if you can squeeze it in. What do you think?
Well, I think if it's kerfuffle or donut, I've got a chance.
All right, I got Sam. You got any ideas for a word you can add in?
Well, let's make it not too tricky because we actually want to see if he will get it in. What do you reckon, Joel? We put the word basketball. No, I'm joking.
I reckon we could just. That's an easy one. I reckon we could put something awkwardly fun in there, like.
Go on, then.
like a dunk shot or
Dunk
something
shot.
like that.
Yeah, right, do dunk
Like,
shot.
This is JJ Redick.
Yeah.
Who says dunk shot.
Yeah, let's do
What do you
that.
reckon? Should we add it in?
That was a lovely dunk shot by Marcus Del Pash.
So I feel like that's one that you could get in that only we'd know about if it did pop up there. Right, I've added dunk shot to the wheel. Dan, are you ready? This is going to give the wheel one more spin. If whatever it lands on, Dan, see if you can squeeze it in. But you don't have to, obviously. But, if you do get it in, the Flyers fans will love you forever. Are you ready, Sam? Let's give this wheel one more spin. Here we go, then.
Oh, you're giving that quite a spin there, Joe.
I have. It's gone forever. Please land on dunk shot. Please land on dunk shot. Please land on dunk shot. Please land on dunk shot.
It's in!
Dunk shot!
I have no evidence for this. This is a fix.
You'll have to watch it later.
It's landed on dunk shot. I can't believe it. Okay, Dan, if you can get dunk shot into your commentary for Sunday's game, Sky Sports, Sheffield Sharks versus Leicester Riders, somehow, people will know where that came from. We would love you forever. See what you can do, Dan, and
I'll see
we'll
what I
listen
can
out.
do.
Great stuff. I've got a couple more questions here to run through with you here on the mailbag segment before we finish. Elliot Wade from our partners at Hoopin' and Luton. What is the trickiest player name you've ever had to pronounce?
The Otis at
Otis
Plymouth. I haven't done him,
Iyekekpolo.
yeah. Well, I've heard about 6 different pronunciations of his name, so it's a bit random. There was that. Remember the guy Plymouth signed who never came over, Craig O.
Craig
Remember that?
we will 1-1.
Yeah.
Apologies if I butchered your name, but that was a ridiculously long name. He never actually got to play there, did he? Because you think he was.
No, he didn't. He didn't play. I've done a lot of international. I remember doing the Asian Games in 2006 in Doha, and we had Mongolia. And obviously, letters are cheap in Mongolian names because they were all ridiculously long. And on the first day, we got through all of the names, and then the next day when we were given the start list, they'd swap round the first name and the surname, so you had to relearn them all over again. So that was a bit of a nightmare. So it's usually in those international tournaments, although there is a fella who plays in France who goes by the name of Steve Ho-You-Fat.
Oh, I know the name.
Which you always struggle not to put too much emphasis on the fat bit of Ho-You-Fat, just in case. I often wondered, has he ever got married? Is there a Mrs. Ho-You-Fat? That's what I wonder.
I'd love to get a Ho-You-Fat jersey. Someone send me one right now.
Elliot Wade.
Yeah, please get a Ho-You-Fat jersey.
Oh, that is incredible.
That's interesting you say that, because I've noticed Ho-You-Fat doing the rounds. I've seen it floating
jerseys,
around.
yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Right, last question, Dan, and this one's come through from a certain Joel Osborne, right here on the Bristol Flyers podcast.
Oh, nightmare.
What advice? Obviously, I look up to you as like the voice of the BBL. Like, I've grown up watching you commentate on many games in the league. What advice would you give personally for any up-and-coming commentator or someone who's looking to get into commentary?
Do it is the thing. I mean, it's much more available now than it was when I started out, because there's so many things being filmed now and put on YouTube at all levels. So you can always find somebody that will do it, even if it's like under 14's game. People film those. Just sit down and do it, because there's no substitute for repetition, and actually you really learn the skill by doing it over and over again. And if you can start out in a small way, get good at it, then you've got an opportunity then to step up. And as I say, 6-7 years ago, there was only me in the BBL, wasn't there? And now there's, I don't know, a dozen guys probably who do it as well. So definitely go out and find somebody. There's bound to be streams go on. You see it in the NBL, people stream, and not all of them have commentary, or the women's NBL, or as I say, my son, I nearly commentated on my son under 14 or under 16 level. For some reason they were streaming it out, and they were like, can you do the commentary for it, because it would be good. And this headset didn't plug into their into their laptop, so I couldn't do it, unfortunately. But yeah, just go out and find some way of doing it, because there's no substitute for getting the reps up.
And I know you'll know this, but if you don't have, if the club you're going to doesn't have the technology or whatever, like a really cheap audio interface and microphone aren't that hard to come by these days, are they, Dan?
No, exactly. I mean, it is about the quality going in, but if you're putting out on a YouTube stream, you'll be fine with just, as you say, a relatively cheap headset and go for it. Because actually, at that point, it's about you trying to do the job and get better at it. And then, when you're working for the TV, they'll bring their own headsets anyway. But it is one of those things. It's relatively easy to do nowadays.
Yeah. Great stuff. Well, I certainly think that's a great place for us to wrap up this week's episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast. Dan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Do send our apologies to Dave for taking you away from him. And just before we let you go, obviously we can't not let you go without giving you a chance to plug the Sunday Night Breakdown. What is it? Where can people tune in? How can people follow you guys online?
Yes, Sunday Night Breakdown. We have a YouTube channel called Sunday Night Breakdown. I'm sure if you search in YouTube, you will find it, although I never quite understand why people watch me and Dave. We don't have all the fancy bells and whistles that you guys have. It's just us sat there talking to each other. And, of course, it's also available on audio wherever you get the good podcasts from.
Great stuff. Awesome. Go check it out. Sunday Night Breakdown. It's like your mini match of the day of a breakdown of every BBL game going on that weekend. It's great to see. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you crack on. Good luck with your games you're commentating on this weekend, and yeah, we'll see you again soon. Sam,
see you soon.
Anything else you want to add, Sam, before we wrap up this episode of the Flyers podcast?
Only that I can't wait for my commentary debut soon. Thanks, Dan, for letting me do that, and also and I can't wait to hear about all these lovely dunk shots coming up, Joel, as well.
Yeah, I'm buzzing to see some dunk shots this weekend on Sky Sports. I can't wait for that one. I've got one thing I've got to add before we wrap up this week's episode of the pod, and that is we have some very, very exciting news for Bristol Flyers fans coming up on next week's podcast. And I can't tell you any more than that. So I'll just tease you right there. It could be some of the best news you've ever heard for Bristol Flyers fans coming on next week's show.
Exciting.
So yeah, do keep your ears peeled for that. Obviously, if you're enjoying the podcast, do be sure to give us a rating and a review. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe for your chance to. What are you doing there, Sam? You really distracted me there. Do give us a rating and a review, like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and all those podcasty things that podcast hosts tell you to do. But apart from that, that's it for this week's show. Best of luck for Bristol Flyers in their first round of the playoffs. Hopefully we'll be here to preview the semi-finals next week. He's Sam, I'm Joel. We'll see you same time next week here on the Bristol Flyers Podcast.